Okay, guys, welcome everyone to our Tuesday night class. And tonight we're going to be talking about a topic which is actually an image that I'm sure many of you have seen before. And it's called the Ladder of Jacob, or Jacob's Ladder, or as I've called it as the title of this class, the Stairway, Stairway to Heaven. Let's have a look at the very famous story of Jacob, because Jacob, that is the grandson of Abraham and son of Isaac, had a dream. And this dream happened in a very, very special and unique place. And this dream was going to have repercussions, not just for Jacob, but for his descendants, all the way right through to the end of Jewish history. So in order to understand and get the most out of this dream, this prophetic dream of Jacob, we're going to have to visit where Jacob was and where he was going. So let's talk about Jacob and the ladder that he had to contend with in the dream. First of all, where was Jacob before the whole ladder business occurred? So the Torah tells us that Jacob was actually living in a place called Haran. And Jacob was in a place called Beersheba. He was going to a place called Haran. Haran was where his father, Yitzchak, had found his wife, Rivka. And it was the place where his grandfather, Abraham, had tremendous success in changing the lives of thousands and thousands of people. However, Jacob had to do a couple of things. First of all, he had to escape his twin brother Esau. And in order to do that, he had to leave the land of Israel. That's very, very important information. Jacob has to leave the land of Israel that has been his home for so many years, in order to, first of all, escape from Esau, escape from his twin brother who wanted to kill him, because Esau thought incorrectly that Jacob had stolen his rightful blessing from their father Isaac. Now we know that he hadn't done that incorrectly, because Yaakov had bought the birthright, if you remember, with a bowl of beans, of lentils that he had sold, that he'd given to Esau, his twin brother. However, Esau, not being a rational individual, decided that he needed to kill Esau, his brother Yaakov, for doing this. Another thing that Yaakov needed to do was find a wife. Where better than where his father had become successful in finding a wife as well. And so now Yaakov leaves the south of Israel, he leaves Beersheba, and he makes his way to Haran, which is outside of the land of Israel. Already we see that Jacob, is beginning to represent the exile of the Jewish people. And that's going to be really the theme of tonight and the vision of the ladder. Jacob represents the Jewish people not in the safety and comfort of their homeland Israel. Of all the patriarchs, Jacob represents this. Yitzchak never left Israel. After the binding of Isaac, after Yitzchak's Akedah, he was so holy, he never left. But Yaakov is going to represent all the Jewish people for the rest of history. And he's the perfect person to do this, because it's only from Yaakov that all the Jewish people come from. Remember, Abraham is going to have a Yitzchak, but he has a Yishmael as well. And Yitzchak has a Yaakov, but he also has an Esau. Yaakov represents the entire Jewish people for the rest of history. That's why his name is going to be changed from Yaakov to Yisrael. We refer to the children of Israel, we're referring to the children of Yaakov, whose name became Yisrael. And the land itself is not going to be called Canaan, it's going to be called Yisrael as well. So Yaakov represents the challenge and the difficulty of exile. And by the way, this movement of Jacob from inside of Israel to outside of Israel is really going to be difficult and even challenging for him as well. Okay, so now he leaves Beersheba. And it's just interesting, the Torah does tell us that when he leaves Beersheba, there's a big void that is left in Beersheba. You see, when a person leaves a place, it shouldn't just be a geographical relocation, bye, I'm gone. The people who leave, who are left behind, are to some degree abandoned. They've been left behind. They don't have this great tzaddik, this great righteous person with them anymore. Therefore, when you leave a place, there should be a void. There should be a vacuum. There should be something that is not the same when a great person leaves a place. And that we see very clearly with Yaakov. Okay, so Vayifka b'makom, he comes to a place. Now, we're not told over here what that place is, but we are told that it's called the makom. Makom is a very interesting word. It literally means place. But the word appeared before. You see, when Abraham was taking his son Isaac to the Akedah, to Temple Mount, it says, V'yura makom merachok, he saw the place from afar. So the word makom refers to a couple of things. Number one, it's a code word for the future site of the Jewish temple. That is Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where King David built the foundations, and then Solomon built the actual first temple himself. That is the place that he stopped off at. He's on Temple Mount. And all the information we're about to share for the next 20, 30 minutes are going to take place on Temple Mount. That's number one. Number two is that Yaakov saw the makom and he bumped into it. The word makom is also one of the names of God, right? Makom, because God, says the Ramban, is considered the ultimate place, right? The place of God. And God is not bound by space or time. He's above time and he's above space. Therefore, this place, like God, is also above time and above place. So makom refers to God. He bumped into God. How? On Temple Mount. And he's about to have a godly revelation at this place. By the way, just as a side point, before he leaves, before Jacob leaves the safety of the land of Israel to go and find wife, or wives in his case, for himself, before he does that, and before he has to deal with all the troubles and difficulties and challenges that come with exile, particularly dealing with his uncle, his mother's brother Lavan, who was a terrible trickster and dishonest individual, and he's going to do business, he's going to be fooled by him maybe 100 times before he is able to overcome and return to the land of Israel. So before he does that, before he leaves Israel, before he leaves the warm and spiritual home, he goes and learns in yeshiva. He actually spends 14 years. You don't see it in the Torah, but there's 14-year gap, which Rashi calculates happens right over here, where Jacob goes and studies in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. Shem was the son of Noah, and Ever was his son. Actually, at this point, Shem was dead, but it's still called in his name. And so Yaakov, like all of us should do, before we go out into the world to start working and getting involved in other more earthly matters, we need to prepare ourselves. There is no better preparation. Maybe not for 14 years, right? But everyone needs some time totally immersed in a Torah learning environment. And if you could do 1 year, like many people are worthy to do, do 1 year. And if you could do 6 months, and if you could do a month, even a week, but there needs to be a time of preparation where we immerse ourselves in order to prepare ourselves for what the future is going to bring. And for Yaakov, it's about to bring a lot of challenge and difficulty. And so he's on this mountain, and the Torah tells us that the sun goes down. The fact that the sun goes down every day, why is that such important information? Because obviously this sun going down was not normal. Really, it was not nighttime, but God wanted Yaakov to put his head down and go to sleep on this mountain. And so he did a miracle and actually set the sun early. Whatever it means, there was a miracle that happened, and Yaakov realized this was a sign, and he put his head down to sleep. Before he did that, he wanted to protect himself from wild animals. And so he took 12 stones and he wrapped these stones like a pipe around his head to protect him. The Midrash tells us that these stones got into a fight. It's a big discussion. I mean, how do stones fight? Well, there's different opinions what that even means. when the Midrash or the Torah speaks of inanimate objects having conversations, the Maharal of Prague tells us there's two possibilities. One possibility is that if a stone could talk, this is what it would say. If a tree could talk, this is what it would say. If a mountain could talk, this is what it would say. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that every animate and inanimate object has an angel, a spiritual guide that hovers over it and represents it in the spiritual world. So if you will, the angel of these stones actually spoke out and said, hey, we want the head of this righteous person resting on us. And so God did a miracle and he melded together these 12 stones and made them into one. Obviously, there's a deeper idea happening over here because Jacob was going to eventually get married and have 12 sons, which become the 12 tribes, which would become the future of the Jewish people. And the idea was, although we have 12 tribes that we're going to come from, that were issue from Yaakov, from Jacob, we are really one. And this one stone represents the one Jewish people that Yaakov was going to be the father of through this journey, leaving the land of Israel. So we're in the right place. We're on Mount Moriah, the future place of the temple, the place where Abraham, his grandfather, brought Isaac, his father, as a potential sacrifice. We're also at the right time. He's just left Israel and and he falls asleep and he has a dream. Now, dreams, we've spoken about before, aren't just people going to sleep and they can be sometimes, but there are 10 dreams in the Torah. And these 10 dreams are actually prophecies. And without these 10 dreams, we would not be the Jewish people that we are today. And this dream of Jacob is probably the most important dream in the Torah and therefore in Jewish, or if not world history. Because in this dream, he sees a ladder. And the ladder goes from the earth to the heaven. It connects them both together. And he sees something unbelievable in this dream. He sees angels, says the Torah, that are ascending and descending. They're going up and they're going down. Okay, why? Says Rashi, I'll tell you why. Because these angels actually were protective angels. Jacob, Abraham before him, and Yaakov and Yitzchak, his father as well, were protected by angels. By the way, just because they were, doesn't mean we aren't as well. There could be spiritual beings, maybe many times beings that take on the guise of physical beings sometimes, like Abraham. Abraham had 3 angels visit him in the form of man. And so Jacob, and maybe upon his descendants, was protected by angels. What's interesting is that these angels had to go through a certain changing of the guard. Why? So the famous commentator Rashi tells us, and it's mentioned in a number of other places, that there are angels inside of Israel and there are angels outside of Israel. That's why the angels are going up and down. Where do angels reside? In the heavens. It should say the angels are going down and up. It doesn't say that. It says the angels that Jacob saw in his vision going on the ladder were going up the ladder and down the ladder. Why? That's the wrong way round. So Rashi is the one who says that's the reason why. Because the angels were leaving him. Because there are angels that reside in the Holy Land of Israel and only take care of the Jewish people in the land of Israel alone. And since he's about to leave the land of Israel, those angels had to depart from him. However, he's still Jacob. He still needs to be presented. He still needs to be protected in Galut, in exile. And so do we, the Jewish people, need to be protected in exile as well. So what exactly does God do? God sends down angels, who are angels specifically designed to protect Jacob and the rest of the Jewish people in the history outside of the land of Israel. So we have Israeli angels. They're like, okay, let's go, yalla, right? Like the Israeli taxi driver. Come on, let's go, yalla, simgaz, right? But you're leaving Israel? Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go. And then as he leaves Israel, they're the ones that go up the ladder back to heaven. And then the new angels come down, the Yodam angels come down, and they're the ones who are ready and prepared to protect Jacob in his years and years of galut, of exile. There's only one problem with this story, with this understanding of angels going up and angels going down. And you know what that is? He's not about to leave Israel. Right now, when this revelation happens, Jacob is in Jerusalem. And we all know that Jerusalem is in the heart of Israel. It's definitely not on the border. So why exactly are the Israeli angels leaving him in his vision, saying, bye-bye, you're about to leave, right? Why don't they wait till he gets to the border of Israel, which he's about to reach because he's going to go to Haran, which is outside of Israel. He's on the border. The angel is like, oh, I'm sorry, this is as far as we can take you. Here we are on the border of Israel. This is beyond our territory, right? We can't get involved in outside activities. Then leave him and let the new angels come down. Does everyone hear the question? It's a fantastic question. It's a question of the Maharal of Prague. Why are the angels leaving him now, if they're the Israeli angels, when he's still in the land of Israel? The answer to this question is a very, very important point, which is going to really reveal so much to us. First of all, about who we are as Jews, what our personal missions are in this world, and more importantly, where we're going. The Maharal says the following: the reason the angels left him at this point, the Israeli angels, who should have pretty much waited till he reached the border at least, and didn't wait till he actually did reach the border, is because it was at this point that the decision and real first step to leaving Israel had finally sunken in. Says the Maharal, wherever you're going, that's where you are. I'll say that again. Wherever you're going, wherever your destination is, when you make a decision to reach a certain destination, wherever you're going, that's where you are. Meaning that Yaakov was still in Israel, but in his mind, he was now going to go to Galut. He prayed at the place of his grandfather and father, where this amazing event had happened, the Akedah. He'd resolved himself to the fact that he was leaving Israel. He took that one step. That's it. All done, all finished. It's as though he had left and the Israeli angels had left him. There is a connected halakha to this story of Jacob and the angels leaving him while he's still in the land of Israel. Besides the very, very important idea of wherever you're going, that's where you are. That means right now you may see yourself in a spiritual location which you're not so happy with. I think most of us are dissatisfied with our spiritual lives, with our emotional lives, and who knows what else. But if you create a vision for yourself, if you create a destination for yourself, although you are far away from that place, you are maybe weeks, months, or years away in the spiritual realm. If that's where you're going, that's where you are right now. I'll give you an interesting proof to this that we actually learn out from Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we have a custom to do something we don't do the rest of the year. What is that custom? There is a custom to say words that we usually say silently. We whisper the entire year, but once a year, on Yom Kippur, we say them out loud. And those are the words that we say after saying the words Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. What are those words? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. You may notice that we whisper these words the entire year, but we say them out loud once a year on Yom Kippur. Why? Because these words were actually said by the angels. They were said by the angels. When Moses went up to get the Torah, he heard the angels saying these words. They're not written in the Torah, in scriptures. And Moses heard them and said, oh, what beautiful words. What a great song of praise. I'm going to bring them to the Jewish people so they can say them every single day. But you know what? Since they're not on the level of angels, and since they're stolen goods, we're going to whisper them. We're going to whisper them all year. However, on Yom Kippur, we're going to say these words loudly. Why? Because on Yom Kippur, we become like Malachim, like angels. We don't eat like angels. We don't drink right? We don't get involved in physical matters or affairs. We become angelic. On that one day, says Moshe Rabbeinu, you have the right to shout out those words loudly. Baruch, Shem Kavod Malchuto, Liolam Va'ed. There's only one question on that story, and that is, on Yom Kippur, you spend the entire day before, Erev Yom Kippur, that day, that Yom Kippur is going to come in at night, eating. On the 9th of Tishrei, it is actually a mitzvah to eat. The more you eat, the more mitzvah you have. So you walk into synagogue, you're full, you haven't prayed at all, you haven't done teshuvah, and then you say the Shema in Mariv, and you say, Baruch Shem Kavod. Wow, that's a little bit much, isn't it? You're sitting there, full stomach, you haven't done anything, and you shout out the name. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Liolam Va'ed. Wouldn't it make more sense at the end of Yom Kippur, after you fasted, after you spend an entire 25 hours doing teshuvah, repenting to God, then you have a right to say the words Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Liolam Va'ed. But we don't. At the end of Yom Kippur, we go back to whispering it, and at the beginning of Yom Kippur, when we haven't even done anything yet, we shout it out. Why? Same idea of the Maharal of Prague, and the same reason that Jacob's angels left him. Because wherever you're going, that's where you are. Since at the beginning of Yom Kippur, you have a vision. You know where you want to be. You want to be at the end of Yom Kippur with 25 hours of prayer and teshuvah, repentance, and not eating and angelic behavior. You know what? Since that's how you're starting out, it's as though you are there. That is the proof that wherever you're going, whichever vision you have of your future spiritual sense, if you have that vision and you really want it, even though you're so far away, you have so many steps to take, it's as though you are there right now. And so the angels left Jacob, and the angels, new angels, came down to be with him. There's more to these angels. These angels, my friends, were sending a message not just to Jacob, but to all of his future descendants. That's us, the Jewish people. Because remember, it's only Jacob who is going to fully become the Jewish people through his descendants, through the issue of his loins. Let's see something fascinating over here to try to figure out what the Midrash tells us about these angels and about the location, and tell us more about this stairway to heaven. You see, the Midrash and the Gemara tells us that actually on this ladder, on this stairway to heaven, there were 4 angels. 4 angels that were going up and were going down. And these 4 angels represent the 4 exiles that the Jewish people were going to go through. And it makes sense, right? Because it was only Jacob's descendants that were going to go into exile. And it was Jacob himself that represents Galut, that represents exile, because he himself had to leave the land of Israel to escape from Esav and to protect himself and to find his wives. And eventually, he was going to make his way back to the land of Israel once he was married with children. So to us, the Jewish people, are going to follow the same pattern of Jacob. We left Israel in the 4 Galuts, and we're going to return at the end of the 4th Galut. So the vision that Jacob saw, because Jacob represents, out of all the patriarchs, exile and finding spiritual success even though you are outside of the land of Israel. And Jacob is going to be the one who's going to return to the land of Israel at the end of his days, at the end of our history as well. We are going to return to the land of Israel. And these 4 exiles are seen as 4 angels. And the first angel he sees going up was the angel of Babylon, because that's the first exile that his descendants were going to go through, the Babylonian exile. And he saw that this angel climbed 70 rungs and then came down 70 rungs. This, which represents the 70 years of that exile and then the end of that exile. The Median angel, right, the Persian and Median, represented the Persian and Median exile we're about to go through, and he went up 52 rungs, and then he came down 52 rungs, which represents the end of that exile. And then he saw the Greek angel, represented the Greek exile of Yavam. That's where the whole Hanukkah story we have starting in a couple of weeks. And he saw that one go up 52 rungs. And then he saw it come down 52 rungs as well. And then he saw the fourth and the last angel, the angel of Edom, the angel of Rome, the Roman one. And he saw it go up and up and up and up. And it wouldn't stop going up. The other ones went up 70 rungs, 52 rungs, 102, and came down. So he knew that each one of those exiles would eventually come to an end. But here he saw the angel of Rome, the Roman exile, go up and up and up and up and up. Not for 10 years or 50 years or even 1,000 years. 2,000 years at least he saw this angel go up and up and up and up. And he started to freak out. And he turned to God and said, God, this is terrifying. How am I going to survive? How are my descendants going to survive these 2,000 years of exile? And God had to calm him down and say, don't worry. Don't worry, even that exile is going to come to an end. It's going to take a long time. But there's going to be a time when a great king is going to arise among the Jewish people, the Mashiach, and he's going to be the one who's going to lead your descendants back to the land of Israel. Just like you're going to return to your father's home in the land of Israel with your family and die there and be buried in the land of Israel, so too your descendants are going to have to suffer exiles, but they will return. Why? Why are these descendants? Oh, by the way, as a side point, the numerical value of the words Bavel, Mada, Yavan, and Romi come to 428, which correspond to the same numerical value, same gematria as Olim v'Yordim, which means that these exiles were seen in these four angels. These angels came to express a message of what the future was going to be. But they also gave us a little secret, And that, my friends, is that where Jacob received this revelation, as Jacob himself calls it, is the Shar HaShamayim, the gateway to heaven, and there is a ladder that connects heaven and earth. The two are connected together. We have a spiritual center and a physical center, but the two are connected. They're not two separate, disparate realities. And the greatest way for us to build our stairway to heaven is through prayer, through tefillah. Because we're told that all prayers that are made, no matter where you are, inside Israel like Yaakov was, or outside the land of Israel like Yaakov was, there is always tefillah. And every single prayer of every person that is made throughout history, of every Jewish tefillah that is made, passes through the world, goes into Israel, goes into Yerushalayim, it makes a left, it makes a right, it goes up, it climbs a mountain, it goes down a little valley, goes up on the mountain, it enters into the site of the temple in Jerusalem to this very day, and enters into heaven. And the angels transport our prayers up to the spiritual world through the Makom HaMikdash, through the place of the Beit HaMikdash. That is why Jacob woke up and freaked out that this is the Shar HaShamayim, the gateway to heaven. Isn't everywhere a gateway to heaven? But particularly, he was being told that this site, the temple, was going to exist and will exist again in the future when the third and final temple is built, and would always be the Shar HaShamayim, the gateway to heaven. Every prayer we make, no matter where we are, no matter when we are, this place of Jacob's vision of the ladder, of the angels going up and going down, was a sign for the future Galot exiles of the Jewish people, but was also a sign of every single prayer that would ever be made in Jewish history, going up and rising to the higher planes of the future. And so the stairway to heaven, the real stairway to heaven, is actually in the land of Israel on Temple Mount. And whenever we go, to this day, we can't go to Temple Mount itself. We can go, some people go around it, some people don't even step up. I have a tradition in my family, we don't even step up there. But that location is so kadosh and so holy that it affects us even in galut, even in exile, and even when we pray. Because our prayers are always heard, and they always are going to rise up to heaven. And the way that happens is just like the angels of Jacob transport his prayers up, so too our prayers are taken up via angel to heaven from that place every single day. That, my friends, is the secret of Jacob's ladder. It is the secret of the angelic beings that protect us inside of Israel, outside of Israel. It is the secret of wherever your future destination is, it's where you are. If your future destination is, I wish I could be a more holy, spiritual individual, keeping Shabbat better, praying better, that's where you are right now. That we learn from Jacob's ladder. We also learn the return of the Jewish people from Galut, from exile, which Jacob represents, the challenge of exile, but still being a holy and great Jew, because the angels are with us and our prayers are always being heard. And although we may not be able to return en masse to the land of Israel, our prayers are always able to go back and get the job done. Okay, I've overrun my time. Thank you all so much for joining me. We're going to, God willing, reappear tomorrow at 12 o'clock, where we're going to look at the very famous stories of Rabbi Akiva and his teacher and rabbi, Nachum Ish Gamzu, to learn out some very important lessons when it comes to how everything is really for the good. So that'll be happening at 12 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Next week, we're going to start a two-part series on Hanukkah. Thank you all. Have a great and wonderful evening.